It's one nice thing not to trip over stuff. It's another thing to skip. There's a big difference between just not suffering and just not tripping and skipping. There's a big difference between sort of kind of feeling good and feeling elation. There's a big difference between not suffering and feeling exaltation. There's huge vibrational distance between those vibrations. And none of you intended to put up with the mediocrity of just enduring. We teach joyous survival, not just survival. You're surviving. You're eternal. That's survival with a capital S. You're surviving. The question is, are you joyous in your surviving? In your eternal survival? Yeah. Now, we didn't want to head you off. We just wanted to get out ahead of it first. And we did. So now?
That was my question. My question to you was going to be, other than meditation, obviously, which puts me into alignment with Source that then manages the path of least resistance.
So we are in agreement that getting out ahead of it is the strongest stance in you getting to control your room, getting out ahead of it.
Yeah. And my question was really about, and I think you have answered it, and I'll have to go and practice what you've just spoken about, but my question was that moment of, and I would put it as, in some ways I've tried to manage my own desires by reining them in, which doesn't work, and I know your teaching is you put your desires and let Source manage them. But was there any insight, which I think you've given me, into that moment when that pattern, I would call it, of thwarting my desires or denying them or very quickly somehow?
Here's the thing, and this is the very powerful and important answer to this really good question. It is a nice thing when you decide to be nicer to yourself, which means don't beat up on yourself with your pattern of negative thought. Be nicer to yourself. Don't beat up on yourself with continuing patterns of resistant thought. Feel the vibrational difference between being there where you're constantly having to be nicer to yourself, where you're constantly having to forgive yourself because you felt that way and it's okay, and getting on a sort of rampage or a pattern where it just feels better and better and better and better. And the thing that is required in that, it really requires establishing as your first priority your relationship with your inner being, who is always there with you and ready to romp. Which leads us to this really important acknowledgement. Connection to your inner being feels like a lot of different emotions to you, but every one of them feels good. So if the emotion in response to the mix of thoughts that you've got going on at any point in time feels satisfying to you, then stick with it and let the momentum carry it to a faster moving thought, to a more productive thought, in that more thoughts are turning to more things, so that you get to personally feel what your inner being feels like relative to this thought you are thinking. So the way that translates in your experience is thoughts that feel like, ooh, that's interesting. That's a leading to exaltation kind of thought. Oh, that's disturbing. That's not one of those thoughts. Oh, that worries me. Oh, that's not one of those thoughts. Be aware of what the emotion that you're feeling feels like and which way it leans. Because sometimes when we talk about exaltation and clarity and passion and alignment and love and appreciation and those emotions that you find often and that you know feel so good, you want to jump from where you are right to that. Well, the law of attraction does not work that way. You've got to allow yourself an increasingly resistance-free environment in order for you to allow that momentum. So let's just consciously acknowledge that the acceleration or the increase in momentum is always about the decrease of resistance. And so then let's just say that an increase in momentum is always about a decrease of negative emotions. Now let's go back precisely to what we were talking about earlier, but let's say it in different words. Are we talking about the path of most good feelings Or are we talking about a path of fewer bad feelings?
More good feelings, yeah.
Of course, but you are where you are. You are where you are. And so this is what we really want you to feel about the emotional scale. It doesn't matter where you are on the emotional scale. There are feelings that feel better and feelings that feel worse. And so rather than comparing yourself to the whole world, let yourself, have a relationship with your inner being who is actively involved in your emotional guidance system. And what anybody else thinks about anything is irrelevant. That's the ultimate you being nice to you. One last thing we want to say. We know you heard all of that, but what to do about it? Now, what to do about it? How to apply that in a sort of real way? Well, what we would do if we were standing in your physical shoes is that we would understand the value, the loveliness, the importance of our guidance system, of our emotions, and we would embrace them all. Because we promise you, your inner being is never looking at you, no matter where you stand in any thought or in any emotion, and judging you as inappropriate. Your inner being always remains in that vibration of love. But you've got to put yourself in a position where you can get within range of being swept up as one of the cooperative components. Your inner being is not going to join you in those lower vibrations in order to pull you back. You have to be self-adjusting. You have to care about how you feel. And you have to practice the way that you do feel. You have to care about how you feel. And you have to practice the way that you do feel. You have to care about how you feel. And you have to practice the way that you feel. So now, this is the piece. You hear these words, and we know, because we can feel you have a different response to these words that you've just heard us speak. Because everyone in this room is in a slightly different place. And so you're receiving this understanding from us from wherever you are. That's just the most natural and the most wonderful and the most perfect thing that could ever be. You are where you are, and that's okay. You are where you are, and that's okay. You are where you are, and that's okay. And there's no ending to how much better the okayness can be. So you hear these words, and you're getting them at some level of your being. But let's say that you're having some thoughts about some things that are worrying you, and you find a way to separate yourself a little bit from those thoughts by the same kind of distraction that you would use if you were trying to help anyone feel better. So you manage some sort of effective distraction, and then you get some good sleep, which is really good distraction because your point of attraction really subsides while you are slumbering. And then you awaken with an impulse to take it further by quieting your mind. And so you do. You sit and deliberately quiet your mind. And because you've quieted your mind, and because your life has caused your desire to be stronger than it's ever been before, and because your inner being, therefore, is calling you in a stronger way than ever before, because your inner being calls you proportionate to your desire, so your inner being is calling you in a more powerful way than ever before, and you're in an interestingly, maybe new to you, maybe even surprising to you, place of less resistance, more allowance. And so your vibration does rise, and this is the important thing. You are aware that your vibration is rising because you can feel the lightness in your being. Maybe you're feeling some thrilling goosebumps. Maybe you're feeling some clarity. Maybe it's not all that fantastic. Maybe it's that you're feeling a relief from resistance. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if it's a relief from resistance or actual movement that you feel in energy. Doesn't matter, because you are where you are and it's all good. You hearing us? But because you have consciously acknowledged in this semi-conscious state, semi-conscious meaning your consciousness of your inner being is really pronounced and the consciousness of your beingness is less pronounced. You know, briefly, don't think too hard about it, that you have shifted your point of attraction. You know it. And now, because you have, your, what you call normal life, the way your life has been receiving circumstances, events is shifting too. You're going to have different manifestations. What do we mean by manifestations? Manifestations are emotions. That's already happened to you in our scenario here. Thoughts are manifestations. Impulses are manifestations. And what happens next in terms of what explodes into your life, in terms of people who come to you and their attitudes, those are manifestations. So what we're getting at here is when you have made a conscious decision to allow your vibration to rise. Did you notice that Esther did not find words when you've decided to raise your vibration? That's never what we are projecting. When you've made a conscious decision to allow your vibration to rise, because like the cork that bobs on the surface of the water, it's natural for your vibration to rise. It is not natural for the cork to be waterlogged. When you hold the cork under the water, that's your attention on something unwanted. When you don't do that, your vibration will rise. So when you have this natural response to your vibration having been allowed by you to rise, and then you connect the dots and acknowledge, because I allowed that, and because it was easy in that scenario, because I felt better and I got a good night's sleep, and then I deliberately quieted my mind and I felt the emotional response to that, and then I noticed what happened next. Now you've got it. Now you've got it. You will never be flying blind again. You will never be in the dark again. You will never be pinching yourself off from guidance again. And nothing less than that will do for any of you. You know too much. Your source energy knows only that, you see. So when you think opposing thoughts to that, you're deliberately pinching yourself off from the whole of who you are. We know this was really a leading edge conversation, but connection to who you really are, until you do that, you don't have anything to give anybody that's of value. You can only give grief. How are you today? I'm a grief giver today. Spreading the grief. How do you know? Because I feel crappy.
Thank you.